Hey everyone, welcome to Beyond at Home. Whether you're tuning in on Facebook or on YouTube, we're so glad that you've joined us. I'm Molly and this is Lockie, and we're going to be your hosts for this week.
Yeah, if you've ever found yourself struggling trying to juggle too many things or your stuff is all cluttered, this episode of Beyond at Home is going to focus on habit of Jesus that's really going to help you out.
We just want to say welcome, particularly if you're new. At Beyond, we want to create a church that unchurched people love to attend, so we're so glad that you're here, and we really think that you'll find this week's content quite helpful for you. The best way to continue following on with us in social media is to like our Instagram, like our Facebook, subscribe to our YouTube, and you'll get notified every time that we go live. Hope you enjoy the content.
Yeah, see you later.
See ya.
Hey, Beyond at Home, Perko again for part 4 of this series where we're looking at the lifestyle habits of Jesus. Last week, we looked at one of my favorite ones, Sabbath. Today, we're looking at a habit that, quite honestly, is more difficult for me. So that's why I decided to grab a cup of tea as we kick things off. You may even want to go grab a cup of coffee or something to help you get through this habit, because it's not one that I think comes naturally to us, but it's one that's incredibly important. I hope you enjoy part 4. Everyone has a junk drawer somewhere in their house. Maybe you don't have necessarily a junk drawer anymore, but maybe you have a closet or a garage or even a shed in the backyard that you keep some of your stuff in that you just don't know where else to put it. Have you ever had trouble finding something in the junk drawer? You knew it was in there, but you just didn't know exactly where you'd placed it. Somebody came over to the house and you quickly threw a bunch of things in the junk drawer, and now you can't find that thing that you desperately need. By the end of the video today, I'm going to share with you an ancient truth that will help you discover that thing that's in your junk drawer. And as a bonus, you're going to reduce your anxiety, and you may even find that you have more time for what matters most to you in life. That's all happening today. But before I get to that, let me just quickly give you a recap on what we've covered so far in this video series called How to Follow the Way of Jesus. We're looking at the keystone habits of Jesus. And if you don't know what a keystone habit is, that's totally fine. Go back to part 1 of this series and you can discover what that's all about. A keystone habit is simply a habit that trickles into every part of your life. It has positive impacts on every part of your life. Jesus called us to be followers of him, and he called us to really apprentice under him, not just to follow the lessons that he taught, but really to adopt the lifestyle that he lived, which includes those keystone habits. The first keystone habit that we looked at was this habit of silence and solitude that Jesus took every single day. And then last video, we talked about the next keystone habit of Sabbath. That's taking a day every week to just stop, rest, replenish, and rejoice in God. In today's video, we're going to take a look at a third keystone habit of Jesus that'll help you with your junk drawer. So let's take a look. Now, some of you may be saying, Jason, I don't have a storage unit. I don't have a shed that's full of junk. I don't even have a junk drawer in my house. So what's the point of this conversation for me? Well, the reality is you may not have one of those like I do, but our lives oftentimes can get filled up with stuff as well. Not just physically, but mentally or emotionally, we can get kind of stuff filled up in our lives. And this keystone habit that Jesus modeled for his followers, his apprentices, will help us even with those areas of our lives as well. We have 4 biographies of the life of Jesus, and that's where we learn about his lifestyle. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John were early followers of Jesus who recorded all the accounts of his life that we can learn how he lived his life from. One of the things you learn about Jesus' life very quickly from reading these biographies is that Jesus liked to travel a lot. He went from town to town, village to village, and he went from place to place. And the second thing you'll learn about Jesus' lifestyle is not only did he travel a lot, he also traveled lightly. In fact, you'll hear all the time the accounts of his travel that he stayed with people, he ate with people, and he barely had anything that he carried with him. You don't read any stories of Jesus getting the moving truck because they're going from one town to the next and the followers all had to get their stuff in order to go to the next place. You'll never hear stories of Jesus even packing a bag to go to the next place. Because Jesus not only traveled a lot, he also traveled lightly. Jesus wasn't somebody that was off to the mall or off to the marketplace to buy the latest sandals that were available on the market in that day. He was quite happy with just one pair of sandals. Jesus not only traveled a lot and traveled lightly, he taught his apprentices, his followers, his disciples, to do the same thing. Now, I'm not saying that all of us should become nomads like Jesus and his followers in the first century. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying sell everything you have and start couch surfing amongst all of your friends because you've got no place to live. I'm not saying that you just fend for yourself either. But I am saying that we need to learn, how do we adopt this lifestyle of simplicity that Jesus lived for us today? You may be a mom or a dad and you're saying, Jason, I've got kids, I've got mouths to feed. Maybe you're a carer for a loved one and you need a place to be able to care for them. And so the idea of living a simple life is going to look very different for you than it was for those first followers of Jesus, those first apprentices. But the truth of this lifestyle, this keystone habit of simple living that Jesus modeled for us, is the same today as it was back then. Jesus, in one of his most famous teachings, addresses this idea of living simply. Listen to what Jesus had to say as Matthew recorded it for us in chapter 6 of his biography. Jesus said these words, "Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moths and vermin destroy and where thieves break in and steal." On the other hand, he says, "But rather store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moths and vermin do not destroy and where thieves do not break in and steal." I love this next line in Jesus' teaching about stuff, about possessions. He says these words, "For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." Then Jesus uses an old Hebrew idiom that we probably don't fully understand today, but we would have if we had grown up in the Jewish culture and if we had grown up in the first century. He uses this idiom to talk about the idea of generosity with our possessions. He says, "The eye is the lamp of the body." This is the old Jewish analogy. If your eyes are healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eyes are unhealthy, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? Right after Jesus talks about understanding where your heart is tied to your treasure, and that we shouldn't store up for ourselves treasures here on earth where people can come and steal it or where rust can come and decay it, but rather we should store up our treasures in heaven. Jesus goes on to share this Jewish analogy of generosity. See, the eye, being the lamp into the body or into the soul, talks about a person that has their eyes up and is aware of people in need around them in the world. Somebody that has their eyes open to people's needs and then helps to meet those needs through generosity is somebody that's filled with light. Someone that's got their eyes down or closed even to the needs around them is somebody that's not generous and their heart and their life is filled with darkness. There's actually a tie-in between what Jesus is talking about with storing up our treasure in heaven and our generosity to those that are around us. Jesus doubles down on this analogy and he says these words. He says, "No one can serve two masters." This is where it gets a little bit difficult for followers of Jesus. And if you're not a follower of Jesus, at this point, this next statement is kind of optional for you, to be honest. But if you're a follower of Jesus, this is really important to hear. "Either you will hate one of the masters and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve," here it comes, this is the gut punch. "You cannot serve both God and money." Or in other words, you can't serve fully God and your possessions at the same time. Either God is going to have your heart or your stuff is going to have your heart. It's one or the other. Then Jesus ties in an important thing with our mental health to our possessions. This is where, if you're not a follower of Jesus, I want to invite you to lean in. Even if you're not sure about the whole God thing and you're not sure about the whole church thing, and maybe somebody just sent you this link to watch online, lean into this, because Jesus ties in something really important about our mental health to our possessions. Here's what he says. Don't worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about your body, what you will wear. Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothes? And then Jesus says, look around. Look at the birds of the air. They do not sow or reap or store away in barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. The birds of the air are not like farmers who plant something in the ground and then reap a harvest and then store it in a silo for later on when they need it. But yet their heavenly Father supplies everything that they need. Jesus is pointing out an important truth here. When we look at the birds of the air and when we look at the flowers of the field, we see that God provides food for the birds of the air. Will he not more, those that he loves, human beings that he created, provide for them everything that they need? Will he not, just like the flowers in the field, provide for us things that we need, clothes for us to wear? Jesus says, you of little faith. Jesus is tying this important truth of worrying about what we will eat or what we will wear with the all-important issue of trust. He's really saying, will you trust me? Look how I take care of the birds. Look how I take care of the flowers. Will you trust me that I will provide everything that you need? Then Jesus finishes up by saying this, so don't worry about what you will eat or what you will drink or what you will wear. For the pagans run after all these things, and your heavenly Father knows that you need them. On the other hand, don't worry, but do this, he says. Seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. Therefore, don't worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. Jesus is really tying a couple of key thoughts here together. Our possessions are something that are tied to our trust in God. And without a trust in God, it'll cause us to worry about things we shouldn't worry about. So I want to invite you, whether you're a Jesus follower or not a Jesus follower, consider this keystone habit of Jesus of living a simplistic life, a simple life. Consider not worrying about simple things that God can provide for you, but putting your trust in him alone. So if you look at this passage that we just read from Jesus, you'll see that he really lived a bare necessities kind of life. In fact, he only identified two things that we really need: food and clothing. If Jesus was alive today, he might be referred to as a minimalist. Josh Becker, who is a famous minimalist, he describes minimalism this way: it is really only living with the things that you need and then removing anything that distracts you from what's important to you. That's minimalism. Now, to be honest with you, I think maybe our needs are more than just the categories of food and clothing. You might say, well, Jason, I really need shelter, or I really need transportation. Those things, I think, quite possibly could be on the list of bare necessities, and even for a minimalist, they might need those. But the reality is, if we are going to adopt the lifestyle of Jesus and live simply like he did, we need to take a few action steps. We need to start by defining what really are the categories of our needs. Have you ever taken the time to really identify what is it that I need in order to live? And as a minimalist or as a simple living type of person like Jesus, only having those things that you really need to live. Then you need to determine what's a distraction from what is most important in my life. Not just define your needs, but determine what's a distraction from what I really want most. What do I really want most out of life? And is there anything in my life that is a distraction from that very thing? Jesus, he was really focused on ministry. He wanted to reach people. That's why he came to earth. So he defined his needs as food and clothing, and then he removed any distractions from his focus on ministry. Then finally, you need to decide where you're going to start. Maybe for you, you need to start in the garage, defining what your needs are and determining what a distraction is. Maybe you need to go to that closet. Maybe you need to go to your car and you need to really define, do I need all of these things in the car, or are these distracting me from what I really want in life? And then finally, after you define what you need, determine what's distracting, and decide where you're going to start, you need to just do it. Just do it. Take a look at that area of your life and determine, is there anything here that I don't really need? And then is there anything here that is a distraction from what I really want in life? Now, before you dive into this, I want to let you know it's not going to be easy. Now, when you first start out this practice of simplicity, I got to be honest with you, it's going to feel like a struggle. It's going to feel like you're paddling upstream, because you really are. You're paddling upstream against the current culture that we live in today. You may not be aware of this, but every single one of us are impacted by 5,000 advertisements a day. Social media, television, radio, the newspaper, billboards, we're inundated with marketing and sales advertisements that are trying to convince us that when you get more stuff, it'll equal more happiness. When the reality is, more stuff oftentimes just equals more stress. So this idea, this keystone habit that Jesus lived by of simplicity is actually countercultural, and it's going to take a lot of effort. I like to say it this way: you have to fight for simplicity, just like I have to paddle hard against the current here. You have to fight for simplicity, because if you don't, you'll drift towards complexity. If you're not fighting for simplicity, you're actually drifting towards complexity. Just like when I'm sitting here in the kayak and I'm not paddling hard against the current, I begin to drift back to where I started. The same is true in life. If you're not fighting for simplicity, you'll be drifting towards complexity. Some of you are thinking right now, Jason, is it really even worth it? Is it worth paddling against the current of culture today? Well, let me just share with you the top 10 benefits to living a lifestyle of simplicity and minimalism. Here's what the top 10 benefits of minimalism are today. Number one, you actually are able to find more clarity in your mind. That's the first thing. Number two, not only do you find more clarity in your mind, but you'll actually have more time for the things that are most important to you as well. You'll have better health, more freedom, less stress, more self-confidence, greater purpose, extra money, better relationships, and ultimately a lifetime of greater memories. If you don't just drift into complexity, but you actually work hard and fight for simplicity. Those are the benefits that come from adopting this keystone habit that Jesus displayed in his lifestyle. So why don't you start today? Why don't you start this week? Don't wait for another week to go by just drifting towards complexity. Start fighting for simplicity today. Take that first step. And I guarantee you, even though the journey may be tough, even though it may take a long period of time like it is for me, I'm just starting out on my journey, at the end of the day, fighting for simplicity will keep you from drifting into complexity.
Hey, welcome back. We hope that you enjoyed the message. Whether you're watching live or whether you're watching later on demand, we're so glad that you've taken the time to connect with us. If you were listening to that message and you actually thought of somebody who would really benefit from hearing that content, we would really encourage you to share that with them, whether that's on Facebook or on YouTube.
Yeah, one thing we recognize here at Beyond is that everyone is on a different part of the faith journey, but we want to provide you with your next step. And we believe that place is with our Beyond the Message podcast. And this week I chat with Jason, and it's a really interesting conversation. We talk about all things simplicity and minimalism, and we ask the question, or we try to answer the question, was Jesus a minimalist? So it's a really interesting conversation. We'd love to point you in that direction. Apart from that, hope to see you next week at Beyond a Home. See you later.
See ya.